Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about another principle of art, which is the principle of contrast. So we've already talked about contrast in art before. If you remember all the way back to art 1 when we talked about value, contrast is when you have pure whites and pure blacks in a drawing or painting. And the more pure whites and pure blacks you have, the higher the contrast is. So this drawing of Robin Williams only has whites and blacks, making it extremely high contrast. However, when you look at this piece over here, there are light grays, medium and dark grays, but there really isn't white or black, at least not pure white or pure black. And so this is a much lower contrast piece. And it's actually really hard to see the top area of this carved face because of that low contrast. However, there's another way that we can use the word contrast when we're talking about art. And we would use contrast to refer to a design that has two or more parts that are very different from each other. So we can have two very different elements of art in our design, like having two contrasting colors over here. But we can also have contrast in the subject matter. So here we have a Santa, and of course we associate Santa with winter, the North Pole, snow. He's usually busy and giving gifts. And here he is completely relaxed on a sunny, beautiful beach, clearly very warm, tropical. We're going to think summer, or at least a really warm part of the world. So there's contrast between the setting and the subject, which is Santa. So how do we use the elements of art to create contrast? I am going to break this down by going through each element and give you guys some examples of how you use them to create contrast in your pieces. So for me, the easiest one is color. And this image over here on the right has a kind of yellow-orange background with a blue chair. And so we have almost a complementary color scheme here. And so using complements are a really easy way to create contrast when you're using color. And fun side note, all complementary pairs consist of a cool color and a warm color. So you have the cool color blue with the warm color of orange or orangish in this case, cool green with warm red, and cool purple with warm yellow. So mixing warm colors and cool colors is another way to create contrast. If we're using shape, we can create contrast by mixing organic shapes with geometric shapes. So we have a lot of these organic uneven shapes, and then we have some very geometric shapes with straight sides and at least portions of perfect circles. If we're using line to create contrast, we want to vary the direction of lines, the width, the length, whether or not they're straight, and even the texture of lines. So here we have vertical lines, horizontal lines, and diagonal lines. We've also varied the contrast of the lines. We have white, gray, black. We have different widths, different sort of softnesses and edges. And here we have very straight lines, whereas here we have very curved lines. So we've really introduced a lot of different lines into this photograph to create a lot of contrast with line. We can also use form to create contrast. So just like with shapes, we have geometric forms and organic forms. And so in the sky, we have some very organic forms in the clouds. And then we have very geometric forms in the buildings. And you can also use shape and form together to contrast each other. So the silhouette of this tree ends up becoming an organic shape and being very flat in comparison to the sky, which has more depth. And then we can also use texture to create contrast. So to create contrast with texture, we're going to mix matte textures. So remember, matte textures don't reflect a lot of light. They're very flat looking. And we can mix those with shiny textures. So we do have some shinier textures, nothing really shiny in this photo, but we have a really nice mix of rough textures like these flowers, and then smooth textures like the leaves and especially this little succulent right here. So that is how you create contrast in art.